Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Revolutionize Dashboard Creation with the Reveal SDK. My name is Jason Barris. I'm a Senior VP here at Infragistics, and I will be your host today. So today's agenda is all about the document object model, which will help you create some amazing experiences for your user. So the idea with the DOM is it is a library outside of the Reveal SDK that lets you use dashboards in a document object model to create new and unique experiences. You will see that through my demos today. So we're going to spend most of our time today doing demos. Recording and slides will be available after the webinar. We will follow up tomorrow with an email, and you can ask questions in the questions Q&A chat, and we will answer those throughout the webinar. So what is the Reveal DOM? The Reveal DOM is this document object model for a Reveal RDash. So an RDash is a zip file. Inside of it is a JSON file, which represents the visualizations, the data sources, the layout of a dashboard that renders in the Reveal view. So using the DOM, either the client or the server DOM, or the TypeScript or the C# DOM. I say client, but it's really TypeScript, so you can use it in HTML, you can use it in Node on the server, it doesn't really matter, or C#, you can have full programmatic control over the document that you're working on, which happens to be a dashboard. So that means you can do things like document, visualizations, add what? Well, give me a pie chart. Give me a grid, give me a bar chart, give me a combo chart. You want to create a new data source item. You want to create a new data source. So all of this ties in together with capabilities and features that you get with the DOM. So you have a lot of power and flexibility with what you can do. This kind of gives a super rough look at the object model. Don't hold me to this, but essentially you've got this dashboard object that has functions, properties, etc. You have visualizations, you have data sources, data source items, and all of these things combined give you that typed view into using the dashboard object to dynamically create dashboards, to load dashboards and edit them, to modify dashboards, etc. So today's presentation is around a bunch of killer scenarios that you may want to create using the document object model libraries. So we're going to go look at the DOM at GitHub. I'm going to show you a little bit about the web component wrapper that we're going to be using in today's demo for some of the demos, just so you're exposed to it. We're not going to do any deep dive. And then we will just, head off and do some demos. So let's minimize PowerPoint. And the first thing I want to do is take a look at the docs for Reveal. So one thing you're going to see today is the web component wrappers. The web component wrappers are still in beta. They are lacking documentation and mostly just lacking a lot of feedback. I use them a lot. We have customers that are using them. But at the end of the day, we need more feedback and just more docs to make them released. The nice thing about the web component wrappers is you can do an npm install, Reveal SDK wrappers Angular, Reveal SDK wrappers React, etc. And the beauty of them, they are a wrapper over the existing jQuery library, but it's a much less verbose API. So for example, this dashboard was just loaded into a Reveal view. The way that the dashboards are loaded is through obviously the Reveal view component, but all of the configuration is through this options object. So using the options, you set all of the properties that you want on your Reveal view, and then you're binding those options to that Reveal view. So it's really much more convenient to use the web component wrappers versus doing the current way through jQuery and JavaScript, because, for example, you want to add 6 data source items on your client. That's like 6 times 3 or 4. It's like 25 lines of code, 24 to 25 lines of code. That's a lot, right? Here, you can do data sources in a single line. So it actually is quite simple. So anyway, we're going to look at this today. I highly recommend you can check these out. If you want to use them in your production app, just remember they are beta. We're looking for feedback. You may run into some gotchas or snafus, but it's under active development. And as you know, if you've been using it, you report something on Discord, you're going to get it fixed really quick. So Brian Lagunas, who authored these components, is on top of them, and he turns around fixes usually in the same day. So for the DOM, there's two repositories here that matter over at the Reveal BI GitHub org. You've got the Reveal SDK DOM and the Reveal BI DOM. The SDK DOM is your .NET C# DOM, and the Reveal BI is your TypeScript. If we jump into the .NET guy, we'll take a look just real quick at a sample. Let's look at dashboard creators. You can see the different data sources and examples here of how to work with the different data sources and how to create different types of charts. I'll just jump down to SQL Server. And this code, you're going to see something very similar in one of my examples, but I wanted to just make you familiar with what it's going to look like. I'll make this a little bit bigger. So we've got this r-document. So you're going to see a lot of like creating a new r-document. That document needs a data source, needs a data source item. It needs visualization. So you're creating data sources, you're creating data source items, you're creating field collections, and then you're adding those to your document. But the ultimate goal here is visualization. So here, it's like the employees data source. Here's the orders data source. What am I doing with those? Well, in this case, I'm doing some data blending, but ultimately, I'm using document.visualizations.add. What am I adding? A new grid visualization. I want to add the customer list, the employee list. I want to add the join tables. So all of this is defined here. There's my orders. There's my employees. And that's kind of how it works. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. Once we start getting into it, you'll realize that to start doing this, even though it's like level 200, 300 stuff, is very simple. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the samples I put together. So you can see here, I've got a little sample app. There's 5, 6, 8, about 10 samples that I want to go through over the next 30 minutes to kind of highlight some of the features of the DOM. So this one, the first three, I'm showing you because they're the fundamentals of loading a dashboard. And that is going to be critical when you start using the DOM. You need to know what to do when you create something in memory, either on the server or on the client side in JavaScript. So here, if I look at this dashboard, it's just a data grid with Pager. I'm loading a dashboard called orders query from the server, but I have a little code viewer here just so I don't have to jump back and forth to Visual Studio Code. But this is standard load dashboard code that you're using. Probably 99% of you are loading dashboards like this right now. You've got a div on the page, and you've got your set base URL. Maybe you've got some properties set like tooltip actions. You're calling load dashboard on the dashboard. You're getting an instance of the reveal view. Underlying data is my dashboard up on the server. And then you're setting the dashboard to the dashboard property of this reveal view. So this is standard. You've seen it. You use it all the time. So let's take a look at loading from JSON. So this is the exact same dashboard. It's orders query, same exact thing we just saw. This code, though, is a little bit different. You're going to notice I have a script here for the Reveal BI DOM. I'm doing everything here in plain old HTML and JavaScript, so I'm using this unpackage manager on the CDN to get the Reveal BI DOM. If you're doing Angular, React, etc., you could do an npm install at Reveal BI DOM, and you have what you need. But I am just doing it like so. So this is lighting up my page with what I need for the DOM. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually calling a web API that is taking the name of a table. My table name is orders query. It's a view up in Azure. I have an Azure instance SQL Server, orders queries, a custom view that I put together, and I'm passing it to my dashboard API, and it's generating this dashboard on the server. I'm not going to go into it right now, but what I am going to show you is that when I do this, I'm doing two things. I'm saving my dashboard as underlying data.r dash, and that's what I just loaded, right? So I just loaded that in the previous example, but I'm also returning the r dash document as JSON to the server. So it's going to come back to the server as a JSON document. So if we grab orders query here and I go to my Swagger and let's go to dashboard table name, let's try it out. I'm going to type in orders query. We'll execute this, and you can see that this is my dashboard document that was just generated on the server. So I'm pulling this JSON back down to the client. What am I going to do with it? Well, I'm waiting for this JSON response. I'm going to stick it in something called dashboard JSON. I'm creating something called r-doc. These are just variable names, but using the DOM, I want to call the load from JSON off of the r-document object, and I'm going to pass it this JSON that just came back. So now I've got the JSON, and it's in an r-document, but it's not a dashboard yet. So how do I get this into a dashboard format that I can then use to load into a reveal view? Well, we've got the r-doc to RV dashboard function, which then creates an RV dashboard or just a dashboard, whatever variable you happen to call it. But ultimately what I'm doing here is this creates the dashboard from this endpoint, returning JSON, and I'm loading that into my reveal view. My reveal view, again, is the same thing in my previous example. It is simply a div on the page. So there's a couple extra lines of code here, but this is the same and this is new. So instead of using like the SDK settings and I'm calling, IG new reveal view and I'm calling load dashboard, which is automatically handled through the internal APIs at your set base URL, you're here actually, generating this JSON, loading the JSON, converting it to a dashboard, and then loading it into a reveal view. Now, the JSON WC, that is using the web component. So you'll see here I have another script reference, reveal SDK wrappers. So if I was using React or Angular, I would have done an npm install, followed the instructions on the help docs, and that would have given me my component. But here I'm using the CDN because I'm just using HTML. So I'm using the reveal SDK wrappers. I'm using the reveal BI DOM. This is very similar. I'm calling the same endpoint. I'm going to get this response back. I'm doing basically everything exactly the same. However, because I am using my SDK wrappers, you'll notice I don't have a div. I actually have a component. I have a web component, RV reveal view with an ID of viewer, and that's what I want to load my JSON object that I created at this endpoint in. So here, if I look at reveal view equals what, well, document.getElement by ID viewer. Okay, I have my reveal view. What am I going to put into it? Well, I'm going to put an RV dashboard, which is what we created here with to RV dashboard. The difference here is I'm doing this in HTML. If you're using Angular or React, you have the bindings built in. So the reveal view would have a property called dashboard name. It would have a property called options. And if you remember those options that I showed you in the docs, you would just be doing data binding. So you wouldn't have to do all this extra work. You wouldn't do get element by ID and load the dashboard. You just give it a dashboard name. Here, in this case, it would be RV dashboard, and it would bind automatically to the reveal view. But I wanted to highlight this because you will be using this component eventually. Once we get the docs sorted out, get more samples, maybe do some more webinars, you'll end up using it a little bit more. So those are the fundamentals. You must know these three things in order to be successful with the DOM. You have to know how to load dashboards. And then once you get the basic API down, you're good to go. So now let's take a look at creating some dynamic visualization. So in this case, I have a pie chart, I've got a bar chart here, and I've got a data grid. These are dynamically created from a REST endpoint. So what I'm going to do here is very similar to what you saw in GitHub, except I'm not doing a SQL Server data source. I'm doing REST. So let's walk through this. So I have a create dashboard function. Create dashboard is called when the page loads. I've got a document.getLID viewer. I create my reveal view dashboard equals what? Well, go through this create dashboard function and return that document back to me. So here I create my new R- document. So at this point, I have a document that I can work with and add things to, and ultimately this is what's going to get returned and displayed inside of that reveal view. So what data source am I going to use? Remember, REST data sources are unique. They're the only ones that work this way in Reveal. You can set the endpoint on the client. So it's a unique data source. None of the ones work like this, but it makes it super easy to do samples like this. We're still going through this life cycle of operations, but this makes it really easy. So what I'm going to do is create a new data source item, and that data source item is going to be part of this particular data source. The endpoint is this code here, or this URL. What's at this URL? Well, I have a few fields there: category ID, name, and product sale. So it's a simple endpoint. But on the data source item, I'm setting some properties. So this is what you would be doing in code in your change data source and your change data source item on the server. The only difference here is that we'll figure out the schema ourselves, or the Reveal engine will figure out the schema. You don't have to do this. But when you're working with the DOM, you must always provide the fields with their data types so we know what to put in the field chooser. And that's the only way you're going to be able to render your dashboards. So you'll notice here that I'm creating a new number field, a new text field. There's new date field, time. So there's different types of fields that you get in Reveal, and those map to whatever SQL types, Postgres types, etc. In this case, I want to use this data source, and I want to use these fields. Oh, what am I going to do with them? Well, I want to add 3 charts. So I want to create a pie chart, a bar chart, and a grid visualization. How does the pie chart or the bar chart know what aggregates to do? How are we going to tell it what to display? Well, here you've got the set label and you've got the set value. So remember, when you're dragging and dropping, you're dragging to a label, dragging to a value. I'm just simply telling it which fields I want. And then in Reveal, everything is automatically a sum. If you don't want it to be a sum, then you would set the aggregate property to, average, median, whatever those other values are. And they map exactly to what's in the designer. So here on my bar chart, I want to show product name and product sales. So my value should be product sales, which will be on the left-hand side or the bottom, I forget, bar chart. And then we'll do product sales. And then the grid visualization, what do I want to show in my grid? Well, I want to show each one of these fields. So what we're doing for each one of these visualization types is we're passing in the title. So what do I want the visualization to be displayed? And then what is the data source item that it's going to use to actually go query for this data? Well, the data source item is all of this stuff right here. So we've set that up, and we're going to use it to create these visualizations. Then I add those visualizations to my document. I return the document, and we get this. So if I maximize this guy, I go into edit mode, and I go to product sales. We look at aggregations. All of these aggregations map to enums in the DOM. So if you want to change the aggregation, you can do that. You have a control over all of these properties with the DOM. So creating something dynamic like that's super easy. I'm hard coding things now. We're going to go into dynamically doing that a little bit later. So here I'm doing something a little bit different. I've got a grid with all of my columns from my orders query. It's a big view up on the server. So it's got all the orders, all the information, everything. And then I've got a summary of that grid right here. So what is happening with this particular dashboard? Again, you can see I've got my SDK wrappers and my Reveal BI DOM. If I scroll all the way to the bottom to this guy, we're doing the same thing. I've got my Reveal view, and then I'm calling Create Dashboard. This guy has a few more things going on, though. So Create Dashboard is going to look very similar to what we saw earlier. I'm going to create a new dashboard document. And for my data source, I've split this out into a different function, get orders query data source item. So if we go look at that, this is awfully similar to the code that you saw in GitHub. So I've got a new DOM data source. I've got a new Microsoft SQL data source item. I'm passing it the title that I want. I'm passing it the table that I want to use. And then I'm passing it the data source item here. There's no real information here that's useful because what's happening, this is creating the visualization with all the stuff that the server now needs. So on the server, what is this going to do? It's going to hit the change data source item async. And if there's anything unique about orders query, it's going to execute it. Otherwise, it's just going to return the data that orders query returns back. So that's how I can display all of those columns and fields in that particular dashboard. So if we go to Reveal and I go to my data source provider, it's very straightforward. I've got my host, my database. My authentication provider has my username and passwords. And I'm just saying, whatever the data source item happens to be, go for it. So in this case, on the grid, I want to display everything. I'm not doing anything unique. So I just, goes through the normal processing that Reveal would do. So what are the fields that I need in this data source? Well, I split this out. This is just a hard-coded array of the fields. You can see I've got some text fields, number fields, date fields. These are all the fields from the schema, and that's basically it. The other interesting thing here is you'll notice that I'm actually passing a header over to the server as well. I'm not using it. I don't even have the user context provider set up in this sample. But what I wanted to show is that all of these things like the set additional headers provider, it all works with the DOM because remember, I'm generating something here, but it's going through the life cycle of Reveal on the server. It's going through all the security, authentication, authorization, queries, etc. All of that is going through that process. So I get my data source item. I want to create this grid. So that's the grid that's on the left-hand side. It's called all orders. What's the data source? It's the orders query data source that I just created. And I want to show all of these fields. So there's my grid that's set up and ready to go. And then I want to show a count of orders by date, right? So I don't want the sum of orders because that would give me the sum of order IDs, and that's going to be a huge number. So what am I doing? So I'm creating what I want to display in my column chart visualization. I want to display a date, month, and a value. What is my date month? Well, I'm creating a new DOM date data field, and I want that to be the order date, and I want the aggregation type to be year. Great. So whatever date is coming back, I want the month label, or I'm creating something that's going to aggregate the order date by year. And then for the value, I don't want to do the default sum. I'm doing an aggregation type of count rows. Great. What am I going to do with those? Well, when I create my column chart visualization called orders by year, I'm passing it the data source, and you can see I have a .set labels and .set values. These could be just the field names, but in my case, I'm not using just the field names. I'm using date month label with the custom aggregation and order ID with a custom aggregation. I set those orders grid, orders column, and that is how we have this custom aggregation. So using the DOM, you do have that complete control over what the aggregation type is and how you're displaying these visualizations. So next, I'm showing this import document. This isn't the best sample, and I don't know why I did this, but it is what it is for the webinar. I kind of noticed it beforehand. What this does is, all of the samples I'm going to show you today, we're starting from scratch. We're creating a new R- document, and then we're doing visualizations.add, and then we just kind of save it or we display it. Well, a lot of times you don't want to do that. A lot of times you might want to load an existing dashboard and then add something to it. Well, that's where import comes into play. So all this code here is identical to what we've already done. We're creating this data source item. We're going to create the pie chart, and then the pie chart would just display in the reveal view. However, what we're doing different here is that I'm creating a new DOM R- document called test dynamic chart. This is where you could create a new R- document and then load an existing document. And instead of just displaying whatever was created here, you can call import. So I'm saying, hey, new document, import this document that I created here, include the dashboard filters, include the visualization filters, and append this to the bottom. So when you're using the DOM, you're not stuck with always having to just start from scratch and add new. You could load an existing dashboard and let users add visualizations to it through whatever mechanism you'd like. So let's move on to some of this dynamic client and dynamic server grid. Again, these are the same views we had earlier. This is some data grids here, but the difference is I am selecting different views from the server, and I'm dynamically creating the grid on the right-hand side. So you can see here, whatever I select, the grid changes. I've got paging set up here. So let's go to like order line items. There's 44 pages. Page size is 50 by default. Dynamic server grid is going to be the exact same thing. Same experience. The only difference is the client grid, I'm doing all the DOM code in the TypeScript DOM. Server grid, I'm doing it in C#. So what does that look like? It's basically going to be very similar. I'm just using different APIs to kind of set this page up. So the first thing that I'm doing is I have an endpoint called fetch, /tables. What I want to do with that is just pull in the tables that I want to list in my combo box. So here, if I try this out, execute, you can see I have a handful of tables here. There's the schema, table name, and if there is a primary key or foreign key, I have the customer ID. What I did here is if I want to do a where clause, like I always need to do a where clause on certain tables. Well, how do I know if it's the table that's selected? Well, I'm just adding some additional metadata so I know. So what I do in my apps is I have a allowed tables.json. So a lot of people are using the data sources dialog, or they have a lookup table, which is like allowed tables per user, per tenant, whatever. I do this very simplistically. I just say, hey, I always want to use these tables, and this is what my endpoint returns. Makes it really easy for me to always know what I'm working with. So I get all my tables. So what do I do once I get all of my tables? Well, I need to get the columns from my tables because that's how I'm going to generate that grid. So in this case, if I try this out, and I think I had order line items as a table, we'll execute that. And you can see that I'm creating this object to come back that has the table name, it has the column name, the SQL data type, and then the reveal data type. So this is an int, which is a number in reveal, and varchar is a string, and it actually ends up being a text data field in reveal. But I create these objects myself. So if we copy this tables and we go to some code here, and we'll go to program.cs, we'll do Control F and paste that in. There's my tables and table name column. So that's what we just did. What I'm doing here is I'm actually doing a query to SQL Server and getting the schema that I'm allowed to see. And then I'm creating this column info object, which gets returned, and then I return that to my client. A key function here, map SQL data type to reveal data type. If we look at this, I'm saying if it's any of these, it's a string. If it's any of these, it's a number, time, Boolean, blah, blah, blah. So I'm doing some conversions here. How am I using that? Well, if we go back to our code on the client, you can see, okay, I've got my tables, I've got my columns, that's the guy here. So now those are just sitting in memory. Now what I'm doing is I'm saying, well, I got these columns. I need to get these boiled down to an array that the grid will understand, or a chart or whatever. So I need the actual reveal type. So I'm saying if it's a string, return a new text field with that column name. If it's a date, return a date field. Time field with that column name. Number and Boolean will return a number field. Otherwise, something went wrong. But at this point now, I've got the information I need from the server, and I have an array of columns that are legitimate data types and column names for reveal. And then from here on out, it's the same code we saw earlier. The only difference is I am setting my grid.setColumns with those fields in the array. So I've got my SQL Server data source item. I'm creating a new grid visualization. This is nice here. I'm using the configure settings to enable paging. So is paging enabled? Yes, it is. And then I return that grid. Where is that grid going? Well, that grid was, that function was actually called here, update dashboard for title. So I had this grid equals grid visualization. Of course, I'm doing the same thing. Let's create a new R-document. Let's add the visualization, and you get it, right? So the only difference between this grid and the other grids on the previous examples was everything is dynamic, and I've got some endpoints that are doing the calls to the server to get what I need to display that grid. So it's actually pretty slick. You know, I mean, few lines of code, and you've got like a dynamic report generator here that's self-service. Oh, okay, your user doesn't like it. Great. Let them go ahead and edit this and change it and do whatever the heck they want with it. Or now duplicate these and start creating bar charts, column charts, etc. So what does this look like if I was doing it from the server? It's much less code. So I'm doing the same endpoint. I'm calling dashboard. Well, no, this is a different endpoint. I used this earlier. I call dashboard table name. This basically does all the work. So I'm saying throw the table name at this endpoint and then do the same exact code we did before and then load this into the reveal view. There's no other client code here of relevance. This is all just code to select the guy in the selector. So I select this, I pass this to my endpoint, it generates this on the server, and I'm good to go. So if we grab order line items here, let's look at dashboard table name, try it out, type in order line items, execute. That's what it's generating on the server. So if we go here, it's called /dashboard. Let's do /dashboard. Dashboard. Oh, because it was searching the selected text. That's very clever. All right, so what I'm doing here, because I'm using that underlying data.r-, I always look for it and then I delete it, just in case there's something that gets hosed or whatever. Same code here. What's the schema? Blah, blah, blah. Same thing I was doing before. But what am I doing on the server? Creating a new R-document. I'm creating a new SQL Server data source. Creating a new SQL Server data source item. All of this is what you would be doing in your data source provider. And I'm just setting properties here. Like there's my new grid visualization. These are the properties that I want to set on it. I also want to configure settings with my page size. And I'm doing everything that I just showed you on the client, but I'm doing it on the server. The beautiful thing is all of that is still going through the entire reveal lifecycle. user context, dashboard provider, data source provider, authentication provider, etc. So it's not like you're circumventing anything using the DOM. You're just working with the dashboard. And remember, a dashboard doesn't know anything about the connection, right? It doesn't know anything about that. That's what's happening through the Reveal SDK. So you can see here, very straightforward and very easy to do in C#. So now if we look at this drag and drop sample, this is just a little kind of cool thing I put together. I'm doing the same thing. I've got my tables here. So if I grab like my order line items, these are the fields. And what I did is I just copied the same images, like the number, the text, etc., from Reveal, and I put it there so it kind of looks like Reveal. But what I'm doing here is, for example, I'm going to drag category name here, and I'm going to drag quantity here, and I'm going to generate this chart. So boom, just like that, I did the same thing here that I was doing here. So if you remember, that I was doing here. So here I did a chart and I did a table, but here, instead of hard coding it all, I'm actually just letting you decide what you want to show in the grid and the chart. So here I got title, total orders, like let's do total sales. Let's show this in a combo chart, generate, boom, it's done. So this is just something, to when you're looking at your scenarios for your customers, it's unlimited. Like, we can't think of everything. So what we want to do is give you the building block. So this is another like sort of great building block example that, hey, if you can get the schema and you can do a little drag and drop, have your UX team build something really beautiful here, you can build your own like Reveal experience. And this is all self-service in the dashboard designer. You get all the power of Reveal, yet you're giving a different layer between what we would make you do for a visualization builder or editor, and then what you might want to offer to your customer. So this is just a cool example. I really like this guy. It was fun to build. And if I just grab like category, we'll do category. What I did is I kind of hard-coded the fact that it's we won't do a combo chart. I hard-coded grid and column chart. And then if there's two numeric values in this guy and you do combo chart, it'll do a combo chart. But you could get crazy. I started to do another like ranking thing. So based on the fields and all of the available chart types, I have like, these are the 15 possible visualizations you might want to create. We'll do that in another webinar. But you can, start thinking about that. I have another AI one where all this is just done through AI, through one-shot prompting. Say, hey, here are the fields that the user selected. What are all the charts that you recommend for this, which is actually pretty cool. Just a sample. So then finally, the dashboard builder. Many of you have seen this example, but this is really amazing. So what this does using the DOM is it looks at all of my visualizations or all my dashboards on the server, and it lists every visualization from every dashboard in a simple list. So what I'm doing is I click these and I'm loading in a single visualization view the charts, right? So this is just from the banking dashboard. This is account referrals. From accounts, this is orders by year. And the reason I did this is because it makes it easy to create experiences where you can just select any visualization from any dashboard and then create a brand new visualization based on it. So that's what I did here. And the nice thing is, hey, I'm inside of Reveal. This is the designer. So I can start, moving things around, resizing items, making this look how the heck I want. And let's make this guy smaller, put him up there, little like that, and make this guy look like that. I can go and edit this and change things if I'd like, but I'd give it a new name, check the box, and I have a brand new visualization. The nice thing about this is that it is, except one API on the server, this is 100% client-side code. So if I go to the code, I'm going to scroll down, and I'm just going to show you this endpoint really quick. This is where I'm getting all of my visualizations from. So if I type that in and we hit enter and we pre-print, this just listed, and this is up in Azure. This particular sample I have running in Azure. It returned every visualization. So here's the dashboard file name, the title, the visualization ID, the title, and the type of chart. And that's how I know what icon or, image to put next to the chart type. So here, when we look at this, you'll see that it's got a nice image next to the name. But all I'm doing is getting this list. Everything else is happening on the client. So what happens on the client? All a user does is they're just clicking that plus sign. What's happening when they click that plus sign is there's a generate dashboard function. So if everything that gets clicked gets stored in this array called source doc, and when you add another click plus again, I just rebuild that whole dashboard. So it's not adding, it's destroying and rebuilding every single time. So when you have 6 visualizations, I'm actually doing this, let's create a new R- document. Let's loop through all of those visualizations in source doc. Let's make sure there's no duplicates. And then I rebuild that and ultimately loading that into the dashboard. So this is the only code that matters. Everything else is just like adding stuff to an array and, visual stuff, right? So this is a slick demo. This particular sample I've got up on GitHub. If you go to github.com dashboard builder and you go to repositories, there's the server and then the client. There's an HTML client, an Angular client, and a React client. I just spent time updating the React client. Probably the Angular client's in good shape, but if it's not, shoot me an email or something and let me know. But those are great samples. They are all here. And in fact, there's a YouTube video as well that shows you, all the details of it. So that kind of wraps up the DOM stuff. We're running pretty late here. So let's switch back to the slides and we'll wrap this up. All right, so that's it. That's my last slide, basically. So try Reveal BI today. Obviously, if you're not a customer yet, you can go to revealbi.io, sign up for a demo or a deep dive, and we will, connect with you, find out if Reveal's a fit, and then see if we should go to the next steps. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, jasonb@infragistics.com, with any questions on Reveal or any of Infragistics products. It doesn't matter. But we're really excited about Reveal and the DOM library. I'm excited to do this particular webinar because we've been collecting various samples and putting things together lately. So it would be great to get your feedback. It would be great to hear your scenarios, and we'll see if we can make that happen with Reveal. So I want to thank everyone for coming today. We appreciate your time. Next month, we're going to do a webinar showing some AI stuff, some samples of AI using the DOM, and then hopefully a better sneak peek of where we're at with some of the features that are coming in Reveal. So stay tuned for that. And of course, stay tuned for the email follow-up with your recording that you can share with your colleagues and all that good stuff. So thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. We'll see you at the next webinar.